boards and newsprint and ink here. Go through those doors you see on the right, those wharf doors there. But when they studied further, they decided to get the proper draft. He had to dredge the bottom of the river here, and the cleanup cost was going to be so high, so instead they truck and train in newsprint and ink on the other side of the building. Now let me use that as a segue to talk about the Chicago River. Remember, this is the Chicago River cruise. You've already learned several things. One is the skyscraper was born here in Chicago, 1885. You've also learned the principle of a skyscraper is the weight of the buildings for a structural frame. Okay, everybody knows that. Third thing you have to take home with you is you're on the Chicago River, and it's the only river in the world that runs backwards. Now, how did this come about? Our first European explorers here were Marquette and Joliet, Louis XIV of France, sent them over here to explore the Midwest. They came down the Mississippi over on the other side of Wisconsin, down to what's now Arkansas. The Native American guides told them there were Spanish below them. They were just the two of them, so they decided to hightail it back, and they told them a quicker way to get here. And that was come up, is now the Illinois River and the Plains River. And it's a place near here, those of you who know a lot of Chicago people, near Midway Airport. Now that's to wake everybody up. Listen. If you don't listen to my lecture, then you blow that horn, so stay away. Okay, so, but you remember in the Midwest was covered by huge glaciers in the Ice Age. And as they advanced and regressed over the years, they created little ridges. And one of those little ridges, just 17 miles from here, created a subcontinental divide. The water on that side went to Mississippi, this side went into the Great Lakes. They immediately recognized if you built a little channel between the two, canal, you could connect these two great waterways together. But we did not get that. They were in 1673. We did not get our canal until 165 years later. You remember in 1825, New York State built the Erie Canal, connecting the Hudson River with the Great Lakes. There was great pressure for them to do our canal here. So we dug our canal, and when it was finished, you could leave the New York area, go up the Hudson, through the Erie Canal, into the Great Lakes, down the Chicago River through their canal here, then down the Mississippi, the Gulf of Mexico. It reduced the distance between the East Coast and the Gulf of Mexico by about half, much safer than going around Florida. Same year, 1848, as that was finished, we got our first railroads here. So there's a combination of the railroads coming here and that canal that made Chicago the fastest growing city in the world before our Great Fire. Remember that, okay? But we were still dumping all of our sewage. We had the famous stockyards of the river. We had our household sewage all being dumped to this river, which at that point was still running into Lake Michigan. And you know, if you drink your sewage, you get sick. We had various epidemics here, and finally we figured the best thing to do was to be a good neighbor to the Midwest. We dug another canal, and the bed of that was lower than the Chicago River. So by gravity, we reversed the flow of the Chicago River and sent our sewage down to Mississippi, St. Louis, and New Orleans. We finished that in 1900, and a lot of the guys who worked on this canal, they went down to help dig the Panama Canal later on. Now ahead of us here, there's a bridge upright. This is an old railroad bridge. The trains went across at this point all the way out to the lake. The last user of these tracks was the Chicago Sun-Times. They had a printing plant near where we started out, and they sold their plant there to Donald Trump. We'll show you his buildings later on. But what they've decided to do is just to leave this bridge upright, and but still underneath here, there's tracks all the way to near to the lake. On the other side of this bridge, there's a big, you can see it, a huge block of concrete sort of painted yellow. That's a counterweight for this leaf that goes over the bridge. This is called a trunnion bascule bridge. It operates like a seesaw. That counterweight, concrete block, counterweights the weight of the sleeve. And that's how you lift the bridge by a little motor to pull that leaf up. Okay, let's look down the river now. In the distance, you see the tallest building there. That's the Sears Tower, or the Willis Tower. I'll talk more about it later. For 24 years, it was the tallest building in the world. Let's look right in front of it. There's a beige building that has its heights. And look, there's a pyramid on top of it. It's right on the river. That's the Opera House. If you go over to your left about 11 o'clock, there's a postmodern building there with a pyramid on top of it. But notice that pyramid is done in lattice form. That's by Ralph Johnson Perkins and Will. Why are these pyramids? That pyramid is paying homage to the one on top of the Opera House. Remember, you don't recreate in postmodern, you do a reference to it. Now, why the one on top of the Opera House? That's because, you remember, in 1923, King Tut's tomb was found in Egypt. We had another period when everything was just in the proper. So you see a lot of references to Egypt in postmodern. A lot of postmodern buildings you'll see have a pyramid on top. But that all because of King Tut. There's that noisy train again. Let's look at the building just beyond that curved building that we saw a while ago. Look, the blue building just across the street from it there. That's from the same firm called Pedersen and Fox. That was done about 20 years later. If you notice on that building, the glass goes all the way to the street. Now, why was that? Because in those 20 years, they made great improvements in insulated acoustical glass. So they could take the offices all the way down to the street, despite the fact they were next to that noisy train. So a lot of the things you've already seen on zoning and requirement for light. Another thing is the materials available to architects. These will determine what a building looks like. So here, the different materials available. They could deal right across the street, same firm, a different type building. Solid lobby, open lobby. Okay, we've been into the south bank of the Saskatchewan River now. You can keep going on this with that deep canal. You can go to St. Louis or New Orleans. But for today, we're not going to go that far. As we come up on the left-hand side, you're going to see a low-rise building. That's the only building from the 1950s on our tour today that I'm going to talk about. It's by Grandmaster Probst & White. It originally designed as the corporate headquarters for Morton Salt Company. You all know Morton Salt. You have it on your dining room table. As we get under the bridge, I want you to look at the windows. Okay, if you look at the windows and look at that horizontal piece underneath it, the spandrel, notice it's fluted. That material is stainless steel. In the Second World War, we had, in the war effort, we had to greatly increase our capacity to make steel of all types. So in the 50s, when this was built, you could use stainless steel as a decorative element in your building economically. Now, if you have not done so, I know we have a lot of people on Chicago. There's a building in the Loop, the Inland Steel Building. It's a high-rise entirely clad in stainless steel, and they keep it very pristine. This is sort of has a patina on it, as we say. Again, the materials available to you economically is a factor of what your building looks like. On the left-hand side, we're going to look at the Opera House again. This is by Grandmaster Probst & White. The solid wall next to us here on the river, by the river here, is actually the wall of the Opera Theater itself. Now, those of you from Europe, let me explain. In America, the fine arts are supported by the private sector more than in Europe. The purpose of this building was the offices above the Opera House would subsidize the opera company. Now this was finished in 1929. The first opera company here was Aida, again our Egyptian theme. That same week that Aida premiered here, we had the great stock market crash, the beginning of the Depression. So it took a long time. That particular opera company went bankrupt in the Depression. It took a long time to build the building. Now that's a home of the Lyric Opera. They've been there over 60 years. One of the great opera companies in the world. On the left-hand side, coming on the bridge here, let's look at these two towers by Philip Johnson. That's the 1980s building. Look at the corners here. With that serrated edge, they get 4 corner offices per corner. So if you take these two towers, 4 to a corner, 32 corner offices per floor. We saw the Montgomery Ward building, none. One of the things here was that architects had to deal with this bridge houses, one on the other end the same way. You had to build around those. And by using this device of the serrated edge, you got more square footage, and with the corner offices effect, you can get more rent. But again, what a building looks like, it depends on the opposite space of the architect. Okay, let's look on the right-hand side. At river level, you're looking right into Union Station. But let's look at the building right above it. This is a style we're going to call modern. I'm sorry for all this noise right here. This is what we call modern period. I'll talk a little bit about this later on. You really can't hear for this. Okay, I'm sorry about that noise, but I have no control of it. That style we're going to call modern. It's very popular after the Second World War. You remember I said there was a long period there, there's the Depression, Second World War. And then after the war, that we didn't build any buildings. After the war, we need to build a lot of buildings very rapidly. That's at the time. You remember a skyscraper is a structural frame. The walls are curtain walls, like your skin. On that type of building, what you did was a template of the window and the piece below it, mass produce as many thousands of those as you need. I'll point it out better when we come back because that noise. But that's called modern. Very popular from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. You remember we talked about postmodern. That's how they differ from modern, which called it. Another one here on the right-hand side of it is X Racing. This was originally built as the trading floor for the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. You know, for a trading floor, you needed a big flat column-free floor, and those X Racing on the outside allow you to do that. The fourth of these buildings, I'll talk about them more when we come back, is this one on our right-hand side. It's a 1983 building. Sort of bridge between modern and postmodern. Notice here the bridge slightly turns, so the facade facing us slightly curves with the river. This also is a 1983 building. Remember, in the 1980s was the first time we could use reflective glass economically in our building. You get to bring in other buildings into your building. This is sort of our favorite. If you look at these windows here, they look like if you said boo at them, they could pop out of the frame. Postmodern. Modern to postmodern. Let's come under the bridge on the right-hand side. One was built in 1921, the other in 1932. When this was completed, it was the largest postal facility in the world. In that period of time, we had those mail order catalogs here, Sears and Roebuck, Montgomery Ward, Spiegel. We printed a lot of the telephone directories and Yellow Pages here. We printed a lot of the magazines here, a lot of currency here, stock certificates. So, in that time, all the mail was hand sorted, so you need a huge amount of square footage to do all that sorting. With electronic and sorting and zip code, they no longer use this building. we just went under a very busy boulevard. Those of you who've ever gone from the downtown area west to the interstate system have gone through the base of that building. Why is that? The firm that designed this building, Grant Anderson Post & White, was the successor firm to Daniel Burnham's firm. Daniel Burnham was a great architect and city planner, and his plan for Chicago envisioned a wide boulevard from the downtown area west at that location. So they persuaded the federal government to leave that hole in that building for the Grand Boulevard. But this was finished right at the Depression. We didn't get our Grand Boulevard until after the war, 1955. Now, like I say, that building over there became obsolete with the electronic sorting of the mail. Here's our new post office on the right-hand side, the Letcher Knight Associates 1996 building. It's no longer the largest postal facility in the world, but it's one of the most automated. Let me take a brief time here to talk about, we have a lot of great architects in Chicago, but let me talk about one in particular. The guy I'm going to talk about is the 800-pound gorilla in design since the Second World War, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. He was the life director of the famous Bauhaus School in Germany. You've probably heard of that. When Hitler came to power, he closed it down because he didn't like what they did. Mies needed a place to go to work, and Chicago, the cities around the world were competing for him because of his stature. We got him here. Our package to him was that the Illinois Institute of Technology needed a new campus and let him build his campus, which we give tours of, and also they let him be dean of the School of Architecture there and do his own curriculum. He's the godfather of the modern building. We'll talk about that more as we get back. Students from around the world came here to Chicago to study under Mies. And when we're talking about buildings today, we talk about modern, which is basically a Mies building, postmodern, which is slightly different, and all the buildings since the Second World War we talk about in their reference to Mies. Again, the 800-pound gorilla. He came here in 1938, stayed until he died in 1969. Mies van der Rohe. One of his pupils was Bertram Goldberg. You can look at the building on the left. Actually, Bertram Goldberg grew up in Michigan, went to Germany to study under Mies before the school closed. He liked Mies' design, but he said there's no right angles in nature, so he used the curve. If you look at the layout of this building, River City, it's like a snake, a serpentine. Look at the walls, they're curved. Look at the windows, they're curved. He also believed that you should live and work in this city, so there's apartments above, offices and retail below, and a yacht harbor here. The interesting about his yacht harbor, it keeps the water agitated, so you do not have to remove those boats in the wintertime. Those of you from Chicago know we had to get all our boats out of the water in the wintertime here in Chicago. Look to your right and in the distance, there's a transmission tower way over yonder. Sort of a nondescript, not architecturally significant, but it is from my tour today. And that's because that's built on the site of Miss O'Leary's barn. You remember the Great Fire of 1871. Started in Miss O'Leary's barn, started there, came to the river, jumped the river, burned all the downtown area, and leveled it. Remember, that's what gave rise to the birth of the skyscraper. So, good way to remember this, to say Miss O'Leary's barn was the mother of the skyscraper. Because if she hadn't caught on fire, we probably wouldn't have the skyscraper here. It might have been longer to anywhere else in the world. So I'll tell you later about the father. That barn was sort of a notorious place, so I'll tell you about